if we are going to create sustainable pipeline of women into senior jobs in our organizations, we have to support dads to be equal parents. It's really, really important for dads too. We know that dads are happier and healthier when they have really good relationships with their children. And of course, it's good for the children themselves. As the research shows us that kids that have active, persistent, consistent, positive male role models and fathers in their lives have better outcomes when it comes to education and resilience and behavior at school, especially up until the age of 5, those early formative years.
Welcome to the Company of Dads podcast. After 120 plus episodes, we're doing something different. I'm still your host, Paul Sullivan, and we're still focused on lead dads, working moms, and how small changes at home or work can have a big impact on their lives. What's new is each episode now promises to deliver actionable advice on some area of concern at home or at work. Short, direct, again, actionable. 5 questions, 5 answers. This week, our guest is Elliott Rae, UK-based founder of the Parenting Outloud program, and also editor-in-chief of the Music Football Fatherhood Report. He's a father of 1 daughter, age 8, married, and lives just outside of London. Welcome, Elliott, to the Company of Dads podcast.
Thanks for having me, Paul. I'm joining you from cloudy England. I don't know what the weather's like where you are, but around here it's miserable. So it's great to be talking to you. And I love New York, and I love America. So I might be back at some point. Who knows?
Well, fortunately, we're on the same page here because it's also cloudy here. We have a hurricane coming up the coast, and so it's gray and gloomy. But Elliott, what we're talking about today is going to be anything but gray and gloomy. It's going to shine some sunlight on some of these issues. So 5 questions, 5 answers. Simple one to start off. How did this all start? How did your background, I know you were a civil servant before, how did your background lead to what is now the very popular, very actionable Parenting Out Loud program?
So I had a long career in the civil service. It was interesting. I started as a temp, as many people do. Started as a temp, and 14 years later, I was the head of diversity delivery at the Treasury. So I was supposed to stay there for a few months, ended up staying there for 14 years, but did loads of different people-based roles that really helps me to understand inclusion in the workplace, change management, leadership, organizational development. And it was an incredible kind of 14 years of learning. I worked with some amazing managers. I worked in 4 different departments. And that knowledge and experience has definitely informed my work. The reason I do my work is not necessarily that. The reason I do my work is, 8 years ago, I became a dad. My wife and I had a very, very traumatic birth experience. My daughter was quite poorly when she was born. She had an infection called Group B strep. So we spent a really harrowing and difficult 2 weeks in NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit.
Sure.
We were finally given the good news that we could go home on the Friday after lots of ups and downs and scans and all the things that go on in NICU. Finally got the good news that we could go home. Had a weekend at home, had a day at home as a family. And as per the statutory paternity leave, which is 2 weeks, it meant that I went back to work straight away. And I haven't gone through a very traumatic experience. Ended up suffering from PTSD. And that looks like insomnia, flashbacks, anxiety, panic attacks in work meetings and stuff like that. Eventually sought help and support. And as part of my, if you like it, comfort, I started to write about being a dad. Very kind of light touch, light-hearted at the beginning, nothing too serious. I wasn't ready to kind of open up really at the beginning. So it was very kind of light touch, wrote about music, wrote about fatherhood, wrote about football, and started a blog called Music Football Fatherhood. Over the years, we were lucky enough to get some amazing kind of media attention. We tried lots of different ways of engaging dads. And years later, now we have supported thousands of dads across the UK. We do amazing activities like teaching dads how to do hair, which is really, really funny. We do online group therapy. And we partner with some of the biggest football clubs in the UK to create spaces for dads to have really immersive conversations all around well-being, mental health, gender roles in the house and at work, flexible working, parenting a neurodiverse child, mental health, co-parenting, race, all of that. So we bring all of those issues into our spaces and create opportunities for dads to connect and have open conversations. So I was doing that alongside working. And it got to the point a few years ago where I had to make a decision because I was basically doing 3 full-time jobs. I was working in the civil service in a very senior role. I was running music, football, fatherhood, and obviously being a super involved equal parent. So it got to the point where something had to give and I had to take a bet on myself and similar to you, give it a go. And 3 years later, it's the best decision I ever made. And I love my work. I love what I do, as well as running music, football, fatherhood. I work with lots of the biggest companies in the UK and worldwide as well to help them to support working dads, to help them to explore kind of modern masculinity, to recruit new male allies and explore and improve men's mental health. So I love my work. Such a blessing to do stuff like this. It's incredible.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. All right. Question 2, we're going to get to sort of the crux of this, and that's the Parenting Out Loud program, which I love because you're working with companies. And I, like you, believe that, look, change can come in many different forms. I happen to think that my level of expertise is working with companies because I've spent a lot of time as a reporter, covering them, spent a lot of time talking to them, through my book. So I believe that change can happen at companies, and then, the best companies will bring along the less great companies, and hopefully we'll get a bigger change. But talk to me about what the Parenting Out Loud program is and what it hopes to achieve.
The Parenting Out Loud program was launched in April this year. It's something that I've been talking about, the terminology I've been using for a while and made it up a few years ago, but we really launched officially in April 2024. And we had a big billboard campaign across the London Underground, which was massive, so millions of people travel through London every day.
Yeah.
We had big yellow posters on the train platforms. It was incredible. And the posters said, Parenting Out Loud, when dads are loud and proud about their caring responsibilities at work. And essentially, the Parenting Out Loud messaging campaign is all about how do we, first of all, encourage dads to be loud and proud about their caring responsibilities at work. And second of all, how do we create businesses and organizations that support dads to parent loudly, loud and proud at work? Mm-hmm. And the campaign really is about societal change. There are so many dads now who are equal parents, who are doing so much more in the home, who are, their desire is to be equal and active parents. They want to spend more time with their children. They want to change some of the generational models they have seen in regards to family life and fatherhood, but they struggle for examples. They struggle for legislation and culture that supports them to do that. So it's about how do we give people the language, the encouragement, the community, the motivation, the tools to be able to go to their workplace, be loud and proud, request flexible working, take all the paternity leave that is available, be honest with their line manager when they have to stay at home when the child is sick, to use their out of office to talk about their childcare responsibilities. So it's really about encouraging dads to do that. And secondly, it's about how do we actually change organizations to support dads to do that? Because we know that with the best will in the world, if dads aren't supported to parent out loud at work, it's very, very, very difficult to do so. So a large part of the work has to be working with HR departments, leaders, D&I leads, and just businesses and employees as a whole to really create that culture change, which supports dads to parent loudly at work.
That's great. Question number 3 here. What is the key thing that fathers need to do at work to parent out loud, and break it up into whether you're, a father who is a manager and has some power, obviously, and you're a father who is earlier in his career and perhaps is looking up to that manager? What are the key things that fathers can do to parent loud and proud at work?
Yeah, there are a few things. Before I do that, I just want to touch on quickly why it's so important. This is very important. It's very important for women's equality, gender equality, We know that in the UK, 80% of the gender pay gap is the motherhood penalty. If we are going to create sustainable pipeline of women into senior jobs in our organizations, we have to support dads to be equal parents. It's really, really important for dads too. We know that dads are happier and healthier when they have really good relationships with their children. And of course, it's good for the children themselves. As the research shows us that kids that have active, persistent, consistent, positive male role models and fathers in their lives have better outcomes when it comes to education and resilience and behavior at school, especially up until the age of 5, those early formative years. So Dad's Parenting Out Loudly is critical for families, for business, for healthy societies. How can dads do that? Well, I think let's start with junior dads. So you're a new dad, you're maybe quite young, you're in your organization. I would say first and foremost, it's being very clear when you are applying for jobs, how you want to work. And we are seeing that so much more now as dads choosing employers.
Give me an example of that. Give me an example of the way that junior dad, is careful and choosing and states, what his expectations are. But, look, there's also a reality. He still needs to have a job.
He needs to have a job. But I think there are so many employers now that do support flexible working. There are so many employers that support remote working. So many employers that support and offer enhanced paternity leave. So many employers that are open and honest and clear about their family-friendly policies on their website and through the recruitment process. So if possible, if you have those options, then of course it's about choosing an employer that from the start is open and honest about how they support parents and dads. Employers that offer dad networks, staff networks and whatnot. So I think it's about, first and foremost, if you can, making that choice.
Yeah.
If you are in an organization, you become a dad, and all of a sudden this is an issue for you, then what can you do? I would say it's important to be part of a community. So many more organizations I'm working with now are forming dad staff networks as a subgroup of their parenting network or gender network. I would say plug into that. There will be, maybe not visibly, but there will be other dads in the organization that are thinking how you are thinking. So it's about how do you kind of form relationships with them, connect with them, be part of a supportive community, definitely. Secondly, I would say know your rights. In the UK now, we have new legislation which gives all employees the right to request flexible working, and employers have to respond to that within a certain amount of time. If they can't fulfill your request, they have to find an alternative. So it's about knowing the policy, the legislation, government policy, also knowing what is available to you locally. What does your business offer? And actually taking that up. Thirdly, I would say is relationships. Build a strong relationship with your line manager. So much of our experience at work, yes, it is down to policy and leadership, but a lot of our experience comes down to our line manager. And, for me, from my personal experience, due to having good relationships with my line managers, due to being a high-performing colleague when I was at work, due to being transparent and supportive with other people, I was able to get a lot of grace in regards to my flexibility. And there's arguments for and against that, because we shouldn't need that grace. It should be government policy and consistent. But I think the reality is that so much of how we do things and how we work is based on relationships. So I would say, try to build a strong, transparent relationship with your manager. Talk to them about what you need. Talk to them about the impact of your flexibility and ability to parent loudly on your family. Work out how you can still perform and do your job in a way that works for the business, but also for yourself as well. And sometimes that looks like looking at examples from across the organization where other dads are parenting loudly and working flexibly and taking paternity leave. How do they manage their work? How do they communicate with their stakeholders? How do they use their out of office?
Yep.
What kind of working patterns do they do? So trying to find examples around and kind of put your business case together about how you want to work and how you want to operate in a way that works for the business, obviously, that's important, but also in a way that works for you and your family as well.
Yeah, I love that you talk about out of office. We talk a lot at the company dads about, parenting through your calendar. and putting stuff on your publicly seeable calendar that just doesn't say simply I'm out of office. It says I am doing X with my child from during this 2 hour block. And particularly when you're managers, we've seen it happen over here where that has a cascading effect of like, oh, well, that person there is a CMO and he's a partner. And if he can do that, well, maybe I can do that, or let me reach out to him as a leader. And that kind of will dovetail into question number four. You talked about managers. I've long said change starts in the middle. Chances are not at the CEO level, but those people managers. But when you think about this, when you go into companies, and you've been in many companies, you've talked to them, what can they do better? What is the low hanging fruit for companies so that they can do better by fathers, mothers, and let's face it, caregivers in general?
There's so many things. There's so many things. I think flexibility is so key. So it's about thinking about how do you create equality in who is asking for flexible working and who has those requests approved. So we know in the UK, dads are far less likely to ask for flexible working. And when they do, they are less likely to have those requests approved. I think that comes down to bias in decision making from decision makers, middle managers mostly. So it's about really thinking, if you are a middle manager, what is it that you are or aren't doing to make sure that people in your team, everyone in your team knows they can access this flexibility. And when they do ask for it, making sure you are removing bias from that decision-making process so there is equity and equality in who gets to work flexibly. Secondly, I would say you can role model. I think for all parents in middle management leadership positions, what you do is so powerful. So as you mentioned, Paul, putting it clearly in your calendar, the school pickup responsibilities, out of office, flexibility, just talking about your parenting responsibilities at work, what you're doing on the weekend, just being open and transparent, I think is so powerful in giving permission to other dads, especially, to do the same. I would say it's about knowing your policies. I'm always surprised when I speak to some clients and they are not aware of what their policies are. So they may have a quite generous paternity leave policy, 8 weeks, fully paid, maybe, but not everyone knows that. And so there is that gap in knowledge. I think as a middle manager, it's about knowing exactly what the company offers. It may be paternity leave, it may be leave for neonatal care or miscarriage, or whatever it is, unpaid leave for holiday times. It's about, as a manager, knowing what is available, and don't wait for that person to come to you to ask for it. Actually go and propose to them, have you seen what we offer? Just letting you know, I'm here if you need to take it. I know the policy. So there are some actionable things I think that can be done. I think lastly, as well, I would say, is to support the formation of dad networks in the organization. And this is a new development, probably since the last couple of years, definitely since COVID lockdowns, is that we are seeing so many more organizations now having parenting networks, parenting and caring networks, and subgroups of fatherhood networks. Normally they are started by dads who are just passionate, who have been through an experience themselves, who feel empowered, and they start off as very small. It's a Teams chat, it's an informal Zoom every month. Great. But those groups can be so powerful in regards to supporting a dad to parent out loud, to speak up, to ask for what he needs. As a middle manager, it's about being aware of those support networks around the organization. And again, not waiting for your staff to come and ask for you to go to attend. It's about saying to your staff, hey, this is going on. Have you seen it? Maybe you should go along. It will be helpful for you in regards to your thinking about career and also work and parenting as well.
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, we've seen it here in the States where a lot of the parenting groups, historically, parenting groups, they've been just moms. They've been working moms. And more, a lot of what you're saying is what we say over here, that when you get men, to step up as lead dads, or as you would say, it's as fathers who are parenting, loud and proud, that has this transformative impact on the rest of the organization, because no longer is parenting something that is gendered. It's not like, oh, the child is sick, well, the mom has to leave. Well, as I say, like, there are only two things that moms can do that dads can't, and that's carry a child for 9 months to give birth, and if that woman so chooses, breastfeed. All the rest of the stuff is not gendered, but it's hard for us. I think you're working on it, I'm working on it to change those ingrained biases at companies. And I mean, that leads into our fifth and final question, which is probably the meatiest one here for you, Elliott. And that's, you know, you've talked about what employees can do. You've talked about what managers can do. And in the UK, you've talked about the actual policy that's in place in the government level to allow people to ask for flexible work. But question 5 here: what holds managers and employees back from parenting loud and proud, and how can we best get past that, particularly 4 years, on from COVID, where, we've all seen that we can work differently and be productive.
These issues are, they're societal. When a dad comes to work, he's not only just influenced by what's going on at work, he's influenced by his own upbringing, his childhood, what his family life looked like when he was younger, his wider family and community, social media, traditional media. And for years, we've had traditional gender roles. We've had quite strict gender roles. It's very unlikely that for many people listening, that their parents, their granddad was at the birth of their parents, for example. It was very likely that a lot of people was listening, their parents grew up in a single income household, because in the 60s, 70s, we had quite rigid gender roles. In general, the men would go out to work, hunter-gatherer, and the woman would be the kind of caregiver and see the children and the home. And for generations, that's what we have seen. I guess it's only really recently, in the last couple of decades, but even more so since COVID, really, have we been having a national global conversation about the role of dads. Our natural instinct as men and dads is to care for our children. As you mentioned, the only thing we can't do is carry a child and breastfeed. But our natural instinct to react, to respond, to soothe our baby, to bathe our baby, it is there. As humans, it is there. Some men even experience a drop in testosterone when they become a dad, nature's way of helping us to bond with our baby. But society tells us to suppress those feelings. Society tells us our role in life is to provide for your family. So we are kind of working against all of that. At the same time, when we go to work, we do see a lack of senior role models parenting loudly. And one of the biggest things that we can do to kind of break down the traditional ideas of gendered parenting roles in the workplace is to have senior leaders who are parenting out loud. There's a survey, a piece of research that was done in the UK and by the Behavioral Insights team. That's the arm's length body of the civil service. They worked with a bank called Santander. They did some A and B testing around their paternity leave. So they had a really generous paternity leave policy, about 16 weeks paid for dads. And they broke the test into 2 parts. So the first group, A, we'll call them, they told their managers, the leaders, not to really talk about the policy, don't promote the policy too much, don't speak about it in their communications, just introduce the policy and let it happen. The second group, they told the leaders to talk about the policy, to, if you are you become a new dad, take the full 16 weeks and talk about it loudly, how it was for you. To meet expectant dads and speak to them about the fact that the bank offers this policy and that the leadership really encourage you to do it, and your job will be here when you get back, and will encourage you, and you can even get promoted while you're on paternity leave. They saw a massive increase in that second group of dads taking the full 16 weeks paternity leave, because they saw role modeling, championing, advocacy from the people at the very top of the organization. I think fundamentally we are pack animals. We want to belong. When we see our leaders behaving in a certain way and speaking about things and championing causes, it gives us the permission to do the same thing as well. So I would say the number one thing of how we go about changing that is really recruiting the leadership as advocates and champions. And that's difficult to do for a variety of different reasons. Some of those leaders, the reason why they got there sometimes is because their family was designed in a certain way. They were the provider, breadwinner. They did work long hours. They had a stay-at-home partner, mother, wife. And they probably grew up in households that looked the same as well. So for them to break out of this and understand the new world and understand that so many younger dads under the age of 30 are definitely leading the drive towards equal parenting, and they want to work flexibly, and actually they're looking at their life and success as not just how much money they make in material goods, but the relationship with their children. For those leaders to understand that can be a challenge. And so it does take deep work with those leaders to, first of all, unpack their own experiences and their own bias and ideas, you know, and that can be a challenging conversation. And then it's about saying, okay, once we've done that, how do we sell the business case for why this is important to their business outcomes? And then it's about what do we actually need them to do that's going to be effective to change the behavior across their organization. And so that takes someone at the top table that can facilitate that process. And that's sometimes where I find the sticking point, because not everyone has a champion who has the ability for people like us to go in and work with those leaders in a way that takes them through that process, that supports them in being the allies and advocates that the organization needs them to be to support dads to parent out loud.
You know, I love that you said that because it's something we talk about a lot. I'm a huge student of and fan of behavioral finance. And you know, what of course you're talking about is confirmation bias. Like I got to this level by doing 1, 2, and 3. And so therefore you should do the same. And, you know, what is interesting is, you know, my wife is a senior female executive in asset management, and she talks about it's not just the dads, it's sometimes the moms who've been quite senior as well. You know, they haven't had that, you know, they got there in a certain way and they weren't super transparent about it. Even if they had a caregiver at home, they said, well, I just did it. And, you know, it's exactly like, how do we become more honest? And a lot of it is how do we become more honest with ourselves? Even if you were that man who's in his 60s and had that traditional setup, acknowledge that, you know, lean into it and say, this is what I had, but that may not be what you have. And that's important. Uh, One last question, but Elliott Rae, UK-based founder of the Parenting Out Loud program, editor-in-chief of Music, Football, Fatherhood, father of one 8-year-old daughter, as a dad of daughters, love that. Um, this has been wonderful. The last question is, you know, if there's one word that you could change the definition of, what would it be? And for me, I'll go first. I always want to change the definition of the word provider. And the word provider too often is seen as, you've said it in this podcast, the hunter gatherer, the person who goes out and earns money, and the providing is money, and that of course is important. Without money, we don't have a home. Without money, we don't have food. Without money, we don't have new sneakers. But of course, at the company Dads, we push for a broader definition of provider, where provider is also about love and caring and equal parenting and being a lead dad and being out there. So, Elliott, if there's one word that you hear getting tossed around a lot in the companies that you're doing work for, among the dads you're talking to, if there's one word for which you could expand or change the definition, what would that word be?
That's a great question. You're testing me here. And I love what you said there about changing the definition of provider. I would say for me, it would be masculinity. We all have our own definitions of what masculinity is, and I think it has evolved. I think masculinity should mean that we can be providers, but we can also be provided for. That we can be breadwinners, but we can be caregivers. We can be leaders, and we can be led. We can be protectors, and we need to be protected too. I think masculinity traditionally was rigid. I think now, for not just a nice to have, but actually for the survival and for men to thrive and live long, healthy, happy, productive lives, we need to allow men to be all things at all times, depending on what is needed from us, from our friends and family, and ultimately for ourselves as well. There is some research by the World Health Organization that found that countries that have better gender equality have better outcomes for men's health. They live longer, they're less likely to be depressed, less likely to die by violent death, more likely to have protected sex, I think broadening the idea of masculinity and allowing men to be fluid and who they need to be and be safe in doing that is really key to the health and longevity of all men and dads as well.
That's great. Thank you, Elliott. For those of you who want to learn more about Elliott, ElliottRae.com, 2 L's, 2 T's, RAE. Elliott, thank you again for being my guest today on the Company of Dads podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. I enjoyed it. I loved it.
Thank you for listening to the Company of Dads podcast. I also want to thank the people who make this podcast and everything else that we do at the Company of Dads possible. Helder Mira, who is our audio producer. Lindsay Decker, who handles all of our social media. Terry Brennan, who's helping us with the newsletter and audience acquisition. Emily Servin, who is our web maestro. And of course, Evan Roosevelt, who is working side by side with me in many of the things that we do here at the Company of Dads. It's a great team, and we're just trying to bring you the best in fatherhood. Remember, the one-stop shop for everything is our newsletter, The Dad. Sign up at thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. Thank you again for listening.